Hi, I'm Brian Greenstone, the founder, president, lead programmer, tech support guy, janitor, and all-around head cheese here at Pangea Software. Pangea Software has become one of the leading game developers for the iPhone and the iPod Touch, and this is the first in a series of videos where I'm not only going to demonstrate the games for you, but I'll also give you a behind-the-scenes look at how the games were actually made. Now, the very first game that I want to show is our #1 selling game, Enigmo. Enigma's won many awards, including the very first Best iPhone Game Award from Apple back in 2008. Enigmo is what I like to call a physics-based puzzle game. The basic concept is that you have these falling water droplets, and you need to get the water droplets into their container. To do this, you use various puzzle pieces to direct the flow of droplets. These pieces include bumpers, sliders, sponges, and so on. Once you get 40 droplets into the container, you've won the level, and the faster you complete a level, the more bonus points you get. Each level in Enigmo gets more and more complex, and there are other liquids such as oil and lava, and you'll end up using quite a few puzzle pieces to complete some of the more difficult levels. It's a very challenging and a visually stunning game. One of the reasons that Enigma has been such a huge hit on the iPhone really is that the game works so well with the iPhone interface. It's all drag and drop, you pinch to zoom in and out, and it really just has a natural feel about it. Enigma was not originally developed for the iPhone. It was actually a Mac game that Pangea Software did back in 2003. And it was really a departure from the kinds of games that we used to do because we were known for doing action-adventure games. Games like Bugdom, Nanosaur, Automatic, things along that genre. What happened was we were working on a game called Billy Frontier, and Billy Frontier ran into some technical difficulties, and we decided we'd just take some time off to get those issues resolved. And in that time I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and revisit this game design that I had written about 7 years prior, and this was back when I was in college. And the game design was called Liquids. Liquids was something that was inspired by a toy that my grandparents had back in the 1970s. When I was really little, my grandparents had this gizmo, which consisted of a tray filled with small metal ball bearings, and there was this motorized corkscrew on one end which would grab the balls, and as it spun, it would transport them to the top of a tower. Then the balls would roll off the top of the tower and they'd fall onto 3 rubber drums which were below. The balls would bounce off the first drum, then the second, and then the third before falling back into the tray, where the whole process would repeat itself again. This thing had always amazed me, especially because I wasn't even allowed to touch it when I was a little kid. So a decade later, I wrote up this Liquids game design that was based on that concept, but unfortunately the technology back then really didn't exist to pull it off right. So the idea got shelved, I kept the game design all those years, and then back in 2003 I said, you know, I think the technology finally exists to do this game, so it got done, and now everybody knows it as Enigmo. Getting Enigmo to run on the iPhone was no easy task. Now don't get me wrong, the iPhone is an incredibly powerful device, amazingly powerful really, but on the same note, Enigmo is also a very computationally heavy game, so I really had my doubts whether the game was going to run at all. In the Mac version of Enigmo, the water droplets are rendered as 3D models most of the time, and there was no way the iPhone was going to be able to handle so many droplets with that many polygons. Therefore, the first step in optimizing the game was to render those 3D droplets out as 2D images and have the game just draw simple sprites for each droplet. This is many times more efficient than trying to draw 3D droplet models. Also, Enigmo does true polygon-accurate collision tests. That's why the physics in the game works so well, and there's some pretty intense math involved with that. So the next step in optimizing the game for the iPhone was to reduce the number of polygons in the puzzle geometry. The original 3D models in the Mac version of Enigmo had a lot of extra details like edge bevels and extrusions and things like that. So Duncan Narr, the artist who worked on the original game, went in and reduced the poly count on all the game's geometry. This greatly reduced the number of collision calculations required on each frame, but the collision code itself was still a huge bottleneck. So the majority of the time spent porting Enigmo to the iPhone involved optimizing this collision code. And in the end, much of it actually got rewritten. The new version of the collision engine is probably twice as fast as the original code for the Mac version of the game, And this improvement, along with many other code tweaks, eventually doubled the frame rate of the game. Now, unfortunately, there was one performance hurdle which simply could not be overcome, and that was music. Enigmo uses every available cycle from the CPU in order to run smoothly, and processing music on the iPhone also takes a lot of horsepower. So for several days we struggled with, how can we get the music to run on the iPhone without bringing our frame rate down, because we really wanted a high frame rate in the game. And Mike Beckett, who was the musician that did the music for the game, and incidentally, the music actually originally comes from Cro-Mag Rally, the level songs at least do. So Mike had done an original title song or theme song for Enigmo, along with a end level bonus song. And we really wanted to try to get those songs in there, but we decided in the end that Enigmo was all about frame rate. And so the music took a back seat and we had to sacrifice it. It was the only way to make sure that we got the best frame rate that we could out of the game. Before the App Store launched, my expectations were that Enigmo might sell 20,000 units over its entire lifetime. And some of the people I know at Apple told me that this was a lowball figure and that I should expect higher. But even the numbers that they were telling me ended up getting blown completely out of the water, because from July of 2008 through January of 2009, we had sold over 810,000 copies of the game, and it's still going strong today. Well, that's the inside scoop on Enigmo. It's one of the best iPhone games out there, and I hope you'll check it out. And in the next episode of this series, I'll be telling you everything you ever wanted to know about the very best game Pangea Software has ever done. And that game is called Automatic.